That Old Queer, Episode 2, Elagabalus. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the land on which we gather. We are recording this on the Sunshine Coast, Queensland, and work has been done for this project on both Cubby Cubby and Jinnabara land. We pay our respects to their elders, both past, present, and future. It always was, and always will be, Aboriginal land. Hello and welcome to That Old Queer, a queer history podcast, a podcast where each episode we will be taking a queer history figure and exploring them. My name is Anthony Borsato, and I, as always, well, for the second time now, I suppose, will be your host. Joining me today and for the foreseeable future is my co-host Tayler, Gale. Who are we? Well, we're just a couple of queers your mother would have warned you about who are sick of our history being rewritten or forgotten or destroyed. How are you, Tayler? How you been?
I'm okay. I've been really stressed.
Yeah, really stressed.
It's been a big day at work today. But pushing through it.
Good, good. Well, you better push through because we have a very interesting figure on tonight.
Yeah.
A very interesting person. So like each week, we're going to start with who they be.
Who they be?
This segment is where I have a fact that I have written down that I give to Tayler. She reads it out and then has to try to guess who we are talking about. So your fact.
It's only one card. Okay. Who they? Granny giveth and granny taketh away. This person's grandmother was instrumental in moving this person from high priest to emperor of the Roman Empire, and then just as easily remove them when it was not looking good for the family.
Yeah, so this person's grandmother sort of was instrumental in placing them in power, and then
Like a kingmaker.
sort of like a kingmaker, an emperor maker,
Yeah.
and then sort of it looked bad for the family there for a bit, and they
Yeah.
got rid of them. So any idea who it is?
No, there's so many emperors there could be. Obviously, it's Roman.
Yeah. Well, I think you could probably guess at least one of their names because most Roman emperors had this name.
Depends, because it depends what area it was on.
You know, the warning of the Ides of March.
Who is it, Anthony?
So the historical figure we're exploring this week is Emperor Elagabalus, or if we're going to go by their regnal name, their emperor name, it is Imperator Caesar Marcus Aurelius Antoninus Pius Felix Augustus.
So all the emperors.
So, that's why I said you probably could have gotten at least Caesar.
Yeah,
in
Caesar
there.
or Augustus would be my guess.
Yeah, but I think we'll probably stick to Elagabalus today to describe them.
Yeah.
Now, usually at some point during this, we sort of have a disclaimer talking about how these people come from history, so we can't really 100% narrow down their identities. The one today is a little bit more complicated.
Right.
Because really when I was doing research on them, I wasn't sure on what pronouns to use.
Okay.
Because with Elagabalus, the question is really raised of what pronouns to use.
Mhm.
Historically, they were perceived as male, but the concept of transgenderism wasn't really around in this time of the Roman Empire. But there is documentation that states that they were seeking gender affirming surgeries to be female.
Right.
But there is also, as we'll talk about a bit later, there is doubts around that report around they're asking for a transitional surgery because of who was the only account around this person's call for a gender affirming surgery. So we are going to make the conscious effort to use gender neutral pronouns while talking about Elagabalus, they, them. I do apologize if I do slip. all of the research out there uses he, him pronouns while talking about Elagabalus, but I think in a modern setting we can do better if there is a question raised that isn't completely answered. I think we should go with they, them.
Yeah.
I was even considering going she, her, but with the raising of doubts, I sort of went, I think gender neutral may be the best answer to that.
I'd say it's the best one.
Yeah. So yes, I apologize again if I use he, him, because all the texts I have read and all the references to them that have been translated or analyzed have all been translated through the lens of them being male predominantly.
Yeah.
So all the facts that have been written have been written down he, him, but we are going to actively use they, them. So now that that is out of the way, we're going to move into our second segment that was our first one last week and we'll do again this week, is what in the wiki, where I take the first paragraph of a Wikipedia, read it out because it usually gives a good general knowledge base on who that person was. And yes, it's not academic, but we don't really care about that. So last week we got you to do a what in the wiki song. You going to do another one this week?
I think. What in the wiki?
Yeah. Okay, so what in the wiki? Elagabalus, or Heliogabalus, born 204 and died 11th of March 222, officially known as Antinous, was a Roman emperor from 218 to 222. Their short reign was conspicuous for sex scandals and religious controversy. A close relative to the Severan dynasty, they came from the prominent Arab family in Emesa Homs, Syria, where in their early youth they served as head priest of the sun god Elagabal. After the death of their cousin, the Emperor Caracalla, Elagabalus was raised to be the principate at 14 years of age in an army revolt instigated by their grandmother, Julia Mesa, against Carcalla's short-lived successor, Marcinus. As a private citizen, they were probably named Varius Acvidus Basanius. Upon becoming emperor, they took the name Marcus Aurelius Antinous and only posthumously became known as the Latinized name of their god, which was, as I said before, Elagabal. Later historians suggest Elagabalus showed a disregard for Roman religion tradition and sexual taboos. They replaced the traditional head of the Roman pantheon, Jupiter, with their deity, Elagabal, of whom they had been the high priest. They forced leading members of Rome government to participate in religious rites celebrating this deity, presiding over them in person. They married 4 women, including a Vestal Virgin, and lavished favours on male courtiers thought to have been their lovers. They were also reported to have prostituted themselves. Their behaviours estranged the Praetorian Guard, the Senate, and the common people alike. Amidst growing opposition at just 18 years of age, they were assassinated and replaced by their cousin, Severus Alexander, in March 222. The assassination plot against Elagabalus was devised by their grandmother, Julia Mesa, and carried out by a disaffected member of the Praetorian Guard. Elagabalus developed a reputation among their contemporaries for extreme eccentricities, decadence, zealotry, and sexual promiscuity. This tradition has persisted, and among writers of early modern age, they suffered one of the worst reputations among Roman emperors. Edward Gibbon, for example, wrote that Elagabalus abandoned, and I'm using him pronouns in this because this is how he quoted, abandoned himself to grotesque pleasures with ungoverned fury. According to Barthold Gorg Niebuhr, the name ungoverned fury. Barthard Gerger Niebuhr, the name Elagabalus is branded in history among all others because of his unspeakable, disgusting life. An example of modern historians' assessments is Adrian Goldworthy. Elagabalus was not a tyrant, but he was an incompetent, probably the least able emperor Rome had ever seen. Despite universal condemnation of their reign, some scholars do write warmly about them, including 6th century Roman chronicle John Malus and Warwick Ball, a modern historian who described them as innovation and as innovative and a tragic enigma lost behind centuries of prejudice. So they had quite a long first paragraph to their Wikipedia page. And I think that's might be a little common with some of these emperors of past, because there is a lot of things to cover. What are your first thoughts on them?
I feel like in their short time as emperor, fit a lot of things in.
Yeah, because they were only emperor from 218 to 222, so it was only 4 years that they were.
And what, they were assassinated at 18?
Assassinated 18. And that's another thing that I think is so sad, is you see pictures of them, or especially a statue of them, and they look so young.
Yeah.
It is a baby's face, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so known throughout history as being a promiscuous, and even things like prostituting themselves is such a strange way to describe the activities of an emperor.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like slander towards them.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that more a bit later on, because that really comes up to this question mark around Elagabalus is around his reputation. But I'll take you through a few facts of how they got into power. Elagabalus's predecessor was Marcinus, and to suppress the threat against himself, Marcinus, he assassinated his predecessor and then exiled everyone to Syria, pretty much. This included Elagabalus's granny, Julia Mesa, and her 2 daughters and her eldest grandchild. So Elagabalus was alive at the time when they were exiled. Upon arriving in Syria, Granny started to plot pretty much straight away. Got the best advisors for Elagabalus, and started to work on this, overthrowing Marcinus and elevate the 14-year-old to the throne, the imperial throne, especially by spreading rumors that Elagabalus was the child of Carcalla, which was the emperor just before the one that they were overthrowing. And that they should that Elagabalus should have the loyalty of the armies. So they gained many legionnaires in favor of them and fought back, and eventually winning the throne. And what they actually did was they actually sort of expunged Marcinus' reign from history a little bit. They sort of, as a group, just sort of decided he was never emperor.
Which is a lot of common theme with people like taking over, like seizing power from someone. It's just like, yeah, that guy didn't exist. That didn't happen. Like, this is the truth.
Yeah, and it's very much written that sort of Elagabalus was considered the true heir of Carcalla, so they got the throne of succession straight away, and so they cut out the other one. But Elagabalus was known as breaking of rules from the moment they became emperor.
I mean, what, 14, 16-year-old kids?
Yeah, because they're known for their restraint.
Yeah.
So to begin with, they declared themselves emperor before they had Senate approval, which was not a go-go. Yeah. They eventually got approval by the Senate as the rightful emperor, but they declared themselves. There was a really interesting quote, but I can't quite recall it. That it was this idea that there was this hubris on Elagabalus's part to just take over, and that there was no consideration for the tradition, which is a thing that goes through a lot with Elagabalus.
So very impulsive.
Very impulsive.
Like any teenager.
With any teenager.
My way or the highway, let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any teenager with probably a fair bit of testosterone going through their system as well. He was known to be quite reckless in times.
And has also just been handed
ultimate power.
The power of Rome.
The power of Rome, yeah. Elagabalus also sent a picture ahead of themselves to Rome to be put up in the Senate, so that people would not be surprised by their Eastern garb and their appearance when they got there. However, it is said that the painting was to be hung over Victoria, the goddess Victoria. It put senators in the position, and I'm quoting here, it put senators in the position of seeming to make offerings to Elagabalus when they made offerings to Victoria.
Ooh. I mean, perfect power play.
It kind of is.
Like, really intelligent choice. But was that his doing, or was that Granny or one of the advisors doing?
Well, it's not 100% sure.
Yes.
The fact just sort of says that they sent a portrait ahead so that people wouldn't be surprised with how they looked or how they dressed.
Yeah.
But once arriving in Rome, Elagabalus' relationship to their mother and grandmother was strong at 1st. They were influential supporters from the beginning.
Understandably.
Yeah. But according to sort of history, they were the first women allowed in the Senate. The mother and the grandmother apparently were the first women allowed in the Senate, and they both received senatorial titles. So his, let me just check my notes quickly. Somalia, the established title of Clarissima, and Mesa, the more unorthodox Mater. I'm not going to read the Latin, I'm sorry. But the grandmother pretty much got mother of the army camp and of the Senate was sort of the unofficial title that the grandmother was sort of given in the Senate.
All the power to the whole family.
Yeah, pretty much. And then it only sort of gets worse from there because in 220, so 2 years after the reign has begun, Elagabalus instated Elagabal as the chief deity of the Roman pantheon, which was
a big no-no.
A big no-no. They believe that happened on like a winter solstice. So Elagabalus was then entitled highest priest of the unconquered god, the sun, Elagabal, supreme pontiff. So now he was, there was a foreign god that was being honored above Jupiter. And also the emperor was then also the chief priest, which shocked many Romans at the time.
Yeah, but he was they were already a priest of that.
Yeah, they were already a priest of Elagabal back in Syria.
Yeah.
From a very young age, apparently they were religious and an acolyte of Elagabal.
I wonder what the tenets of Elagabal would be.
I'm not sure. They are the sun god.
Yeah.
So I wonder. I don't know much about the Roman pantheon actually. I'm more of a Greek boy.
Same.
But yeah, it just became this big sort of shock apparently to Rome that there was now a foreign god.
Yeah.
Above Jupiter as the head of the pantheon, as the chief deity.
Yeah.
And of course, as emperor, he sort of instilled that who can go against his wishes as well.
It's kind of like he's put all these pieces in place like the Borgias did, like being pope and then giving all the titles to son and making the marriages for his daughter.
Yeah,
it kind of has that kind of feel.
And I think you get that a lot in a lot of like absolute powers type situations. But I think, the Senate still held power to a degree. But he was the Roman emperor. He was the Roman Empire. I am the Senate. Sorry, big Star Wars fan. But also, this is where it gets a bit shocking with Elagabalus because for many years they were looked at in history as just this. Well, I'll be honest. A lot of people call them a gay person for a gay man for a long time.
Yeah.
Throughout history, that they were a figure of, male loving male love, and it's only more recently with our understanding of gender identity in a Western society is that being called into question. But
Yeah.
Elagabalus married 4 women.
Yeah.
Married 4 women 5 times.
Right.
So I'll go through the list.
Okay.
Their first wife was Julia Cornelia Paula, whom they married prior to August 219. And between then and August 28, 2020, they were divorced. They divorced Paula and took a Vestal Virgin, Julia Aquila Severa, as their second wife, divorced her and took a third wife, whom Herodion says was Anila Aurelia Faustina, a descendant of Marcus Aurelius, and the widow of a man Elagabalus had recently had executed. And in the last year of their reign, Elagabalus divorced her and remarried Severa, the Vestal Virgin.
Right.
So what's really interesting about this is there's in some of the research I found, there was actually statements that said that Elagabalus, for all intents and purposes, may have been more hated in the time for marrying a Vestal Virgin
Yeah.
than any sort of homosexual activity that they were known for.
I would say, yeah. Like, I feel like that is more of like a thing than like the other.
Because Vestal Virgins were held above all.
Oh yeah.
They were very sort of sacred figures within this society. So to have an emperor claim a Vestal Virgin as their wife is kind of a big deal. But on the opposite side of that, they were meant to have had many male lovers.
Yeah.
They married multiple women, but had multiple male lovers. And wanted to marry them as well, according to the historical records, that they wanted to marry Gannes, who was their tutor when they came from Syria. It was one of the tutors in Syria who came with them. Wanted to name him Caesar as well, sort of a very high. Then wanted to marry a charioteer named Heracles or Hierocles. Also wanted to declare him Caesar. Then the athlete Aurelius Zodicus is said by Cassius Dio, who was a contemporary, to have been Elagabalus's lover. And I can't say this word properly, Copulacarius, which is a non-administrative role, a eunuch chamberlain of the imperial palace.
Right.
Which is sort of a I don't know if they were a eunuch or not, but it was sort of like held a position in the household.
Yeah.
But also the Augustan history says that Zodicus was a husband to Elagabalus.
Right.
And actually held great political influence at the time. Elagabalus apparently delighted in being called Heracles' mistress, wife, and queen. The emperor reportedly wore makeup and wigs, preferred to be called a lady and not a lord, and offered vast sums to any physician who could provide them with a vagina. Although, and this is where we come into this idea of there is discredit into this argument, Claire Rowan says that this last detail seems to be entirely fictive. This idea of them asking for gender-affirming society. But for this reason of
surgery,
of this historical record, I should say, of gender-confirming surgery, Elagabalus is seen by some writers as a very early transgender figure and one of the first on record seeking sex affirming surgeries.
That's fair.
But yeah, it's that is Elagabalus's sexuality and gender in a historical context. So what do you think?
I mean, it's almost like they're going, oh, I love you, I'll name you Caesar, next to it. It seems to be. I mean, it'd be an honor to be named that, but um, the very much the teenage thing of like, love you, give you the best title in the world. Oh, and I love you.
Yeah, it also surprises me that they had so many wives.
Yeah.
I feel like in a historical context, especially with queer people
Mm.
and queer male loving people in history who couldn't be with men,
Yeah.
um, because of society at that time, that to have multiple wives seems to be a strange thing.
Yeah. But it
I
also,
can understand having one wife,
yeah.
but and even marrying a Vestal Virgin
Yeah.
makes complete sense in that narrative to me. But to
Mm.
have multiple wives, I sometimes I wonder whether they were bisexual actually,
Yeah.
because to have four wives is in such a short period of time as well.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up in terms of having four wives, but on all these male lovers as well. It'd be like, was it possible that they were bisexual?
mm. But it's also that, and this is a thing that may come up in the future as well, is that
Mm.
was queerness a weapon to discredit Elagabalus
Yeah.
posthumously is
Mm.
something we also have to consider. Um, but that comes in a bit later as well. It's interesting though because the I I want Elagabalus to be a transgender figure in history.
Yeah.
It's kind of sad that we don't have answers on this.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think comes up in a lot of these podcasts, is that it's sad that we don't know more.
Mm.
Um,
And we can't confirm.
and we can't confirm. But yeah, we have no answers, no full answers, especially because when it comes down to it, there is sort of doubt.
Yeah.
Um,
And I feel like the same with like Sappho, because they was like, it's so far in our history that we, information has been lost to time, whether it is by people hiding it or it's just the records falling apart or
yeah,
other people's involvement. Like, we will never know.
but with Elagabalus, it comes down to a very big thing is why I actively decided not to say to use she her pronouns and to not state that they were a transgender woman, is because all the accounts of that come from one record.
Yeah.
There are other records of them being attracted to men
Mhm.
and having dalliances,
Mm.
but the concept of, from my research and my understanding, it has all come from one source, which was Cassius Dio.
Yeah.
So his
He's done a lot of things.
he was a contemporary historian at the time. He
Mm.
has written a lot. They wrote, I should say, he hasn't, he
Yeah.
dead ages, but he wrote many accounts of Roman history.
Mm.
But I'll read here. Historian Claire Rowan calls Cassius Dio's account a mixture of reliable information and literary exaggeration, noting that Elagabalus's marriages and time as consul are confirmed by numeratic and epigraphic records. So Dio had many false things about Elagabalus in his
Yeah.
records. Um,
But how? But that also puts in the fact of how soon, like within the like years. Not that I don't think I don't think you have it on you. Was when was Cassius Dio recording this?
well, Cassius Dio was a contemporary at the time. He was literally
Yeah.
alive at the time.
Okay.
And Cassius Dio gained power from Severus Alexander, who was the
Priest,
the next one after Elagabalus. he lost power during Elagabalus's reign, apparently,
Mm-hmm.
and then was reappointed to senatorial positions in the next reign.
So there would be definitely parts where he's like, let's not talk as highly of this person in
Yeah.
terms of his biases towards.
And it's also about discrediting him through a
Yeah.
discrediting them through a biographical retelling of their life,
Yeah.
which is not just this Claire Rowan. There are other historians who now sort of go, was this actually what happened?
Or was it propaganda?
Or was it propaganda to somehow...
I think a tree just fell on the roof.
Jesus, that was terrifying.
That was. Everything just shook. I'll be back. We'll just keep rolling. Oh, jeez. I can't see anything.
Because it's pitch black out there?
What? I'm pretty sure it's a branch. Do you want to stop it?
No, I say we leave all that in.
Okay. I can't wait to see how scared we look.
Whew.
Oh,
Deep breaths.
yeah.
But yeah, so where are we up to? We're talking about Cassius Dio.
Yes.
He gained a lot of power from Severus Alexander after Elagabalus's death. It really calls into question the validity of anything he writes about Elagabalus, because, as I said before, queerness has been used as a weapon to discredit people throughout history.
Yeah.
It's a sad fact of history that if you can call them queer or give them that title, that it somehow discredits them amongst the people, which it would have back then.
Yeah.
If it came out that the emperor had been prostituting themselves and wearing wigs and makeup and being subservient to male lovers, to the point as well of trying to change their gender, it would discredit them quite a bit. So what do you think about that?
I mean, it is entirely possible that this is all this information is used to not directly show contrasts of, because I obviously don't know much about the next emperor, but is to his grandmother, their grandmother did, for them to take power, it sort of be the same sort of thing in shaming them and making look like their reign was so horrible. So then the next person to be a lot brighter figure and have a lot more popularity.
Yeah, it's it's a hard discussion to have, especially because, as I said before, I want this figure to be trans.
Yeah.
Because I think being able to see yourself in history is so important. I feel like for a lot of queer people, we don't see ourselves in history very often, especially because a lot of it has been destroyed.
Yeah.
And I find it kind of disgusting that here is this account of a queer person, possibly a queer person, and the only reason it has survived is because it has been written down as criticism of Elagabalus.
Yeah.
That they were queer.
Yeah.
And that they may not have even been queer in the sense of being transgender. There are more accounts of them being with male lovers.
Yeah.
Than this one account of them seeking gender affirming surgeries.
Yeah.
So it's hard to decide where it falls. Was it truthful? In which case, Elagabalus was a woman, probably the only female
Emperor.
Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Don't hold me to that. I don't know all the Roman emperors. There could have been another one. Or was it because male lovers could have been acceptable to a degree in Rome that Elagabalus's enemies made up this story about them wanting to change their body to female as a way of discrediting and hurting their reputation in death to cement the authority of overthrowing them?
This is fair. It's a horrible fact that if it is that all of this done was in slander.
Yeah.
That we exist and we're hanging on to the hope that it's true, but it may not be. It may very much be, oh, this person's not very good, so let's
slander them.
Let's say that they want
not that we're ever saying that being transgender is like
no.
a slanderous thing, but in the context of this historically, it would have worked.
Yes. In the context for Cassius Dio to write.
Yeah, in 222, it would have, especially in Rome and European culture, even though this is, pre-Christian days, it still would have, out of the norm, I suppose, for anyone to even consider.
Yeah, and the way, and part of me looks at the sort of the way it's written and the way you're telling it, going, if there is truth to it, it's not recorded. It's recorded to be slander.
Yeah, it's recorded to hurt the reputation of Elagabalus, not to have a proper historical account. Cassius Dio is, to a degree, a respected historian, though.
Yes.
But the fact that Cassius Dio clearly got things wrong, and made a lot of mistakes in their account of what happened, especially considering he was a contemporary, meaning he lived exactly at the same time. He lived through this reign of Elagabalus. That to get these things wrong is a lot bigger than I'm looking 500 years in the future and I get a few names wrong in writing it down from historical conversations and historical.
So that's what pushes me towards, like, even if he had a correct telling, like Cassius had correct details, what is kept and what he kept, what he recorded, what was published is used against
Elagabalus.
Yeah,
it's,
and I think it is. If it is that, it is definitely tied to the fact that he lost power
and then regained power with Elagabalus' successor.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just I think we like, and we're wanting to sort of give these figures of history a modern identity that people can hold on to, but with this one,
I don't think we can.
And maybe they weren't the best choice for our second episode because there is so much confusion around their gender identity.
And the facts on their life.
That it does become a very we can't.
We can't definitely say.
With Sappho, we sort of said, we think she's a lesbian.
Yeah.
We're pretty sure she's a lesbian, or at least bisexual.
Yeah.
Or at least woman-loving in that sort of realm of not straight.
Yeah.
With Elagabalus, it becomes more difficult because if Elagabalus was a trans woman, were they a bisexual woman?
Yeah. I would feel more confident and comfortable saying that they were at least within the realms of bisexual, because because we can't confirm all.
Yeah, as always, we can't. There's no way to know.
But the fact that they had 4 wives shows that there's something more than just being a beard.
Yeah. Well, that we think of,
that we think of
unless it was sort of
to keep them quiet as well.
yeah, all the wives got unhappy that they weren't seeing their husband at all. But they also died when they were 18. They were so young when they died.
Yeah.
And to have 4 wives is
To have 4 wives like as anyone before you're 18.
yeah, it's
But again, this is sort of like going back to their reckless nature and well, what we assume is their reckless nature and impulsive is like they've been given this power at such a young age that and they have access to these men and women.
yeah.
Like what really was there to stop them?
That's true too. I really think going forward with Elagabalus, I hope people it's hard because Elagabalus has been called male for so many thousands of years to now sort of change that recording of history.
Yeah.
But I kind of think they have to.
Yeah.
I don't think we can predominantly say that necessarily
they were female either.
They were female either.
Yeah.
Purely and simply because Cassius Dio is called into question
in his motives of recording this specific part.
Yeah. Which
like take his word for a lot of other things, but
which sucks, but it's just it sucks that there is not more, you know, non-cis historical figures. There's more out there, and we've got more lined up to come.
Yeah.
But it is kind of sad that a lot of the time
it's hard. It's hard because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
We have a few. I'm pretty sure you have a few that's more modern in terms of not ancient Roman.
Yeah, not ancient Roman. There's a few. Yeah, that are a bit more modern.
Yeah.
But it's just it kind of sucks that if Elagabalus was a woman, that transness was used as a weapon against them.
Yeah.
To discredit them.
Yeah, which is the sad fact of it. And I hope that they are a trans figure, but it's sad that that is being used against them.
Yeah, and it's sad that we can never confirm it purely and simply, unless people out there have found other research. In everything that I have read through sources, it all linked back to Cassius Dio being the only one who stated these things.
Yeah.
So I hope that there is records out there that confirm this out there.
Yeah, but I feel that's the other thing is like you feel like if it was the truth, there would be at least another source.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily as well. A lot of history is on one source.
Yeah.
So shall we finish off Elagabalus's life?
Yes.
Elagabalus lost the support of the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
Then Elagabalus's grandmother turned against him. Julia Mazer perceived that the popular support for the then emperor was waning, so she decided that Elagabalus and their mother, who had encouraged their religious practices, which is one of the... And that's the other thing we have to think of, is that it was the religious practices that was why the populace turned against Elagabalus. Yeah. Nothing to do with queerness. Yeah. All this queerness came out posthumously. Yeah, all the accounts came out posthumously.
Yeah.
It was the religious practice of why the support for Elagabalus was waning amongst the people. So Granny knew that they had to replace Elagabalus.
Yeah.
So she turned to her other daughter, Julia, and her other daughter's son, the 15-year-old Severus. Severus Alexander, who we've mentioned a few times. She then made Elagabalus instate Alexander as their heir, and gave the boy the title of Caesar, which is sort of like the name of the heir. Shortly after that, Elagabalus and Alexander were asked to present themselves at a praetorian, a military camp of the soldiers, where the military showed their support for Alexander. which Elagabalus was not happy about,
Yeah.
called them traitors, and then tried to flee, but was executed. Them and their mother was executed
Yeah.
in this camp. And that is the life of Elagabalus the Emperor.
Yeah. Brutal.
Yeah. It's a lot.
To be fair, you should have been like, you'd have to be sus when your grandmother's like, name this child, you name your cousin your heir.
Yes. Well, you probably would a little bit, but then also I suppose at the time you have to think that people died all the time.
Yeah.
And as emperor, you needed an heir. But it sort of records show that Elagabalus got suspicious of Alexander and tried to have him killed as well.
Okay.
They were no fool. They sort of could see what was happening.
Yeah, good.
But I don't think you can just sort of unname an heir. I don't think he
No.
was able to unname the heir as easily as he probably would have hoped for.
Yeah.
So yeah, possibly the first transgender female Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Possibly a gay Roman emperor.
Yeah.
Gay male Roman emperor. Possibly a non-binary
bisexual emperor.
Roman emperor. God, I wish we had more facts to give, really.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to not include Elagabalus just because they are a very prominent queer figure in history.
Yeah.
And ones whose history was never sort of not talked about.
And cut short.
Yeah, it's...
and life was cut short, I should say.
And cut very short. They were 18 when they died, which is very sad.
Yeah. But like the fact that the grandmother's gone, well, they've dug themselves into a hole, better bury them.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm a little sad to sort of start to end it there.
Yeah.
But that is where we are with Elagabalus. More questions than answers, which is a running theme with history.
Yep.
So yeah, I actually think though there could be with Elagabalus something I do like, and we'll bring it back to something a little positive. Is that I think nearly any queer person can find identity in Elagabalus. If you believe that they are transgender, they're a transgender figure. If you doubt Cassius Dio's accounts, they are a queer man or a bi man or queer man covers that. So yeah, I think any queer person can find something in Elagabalus.
Yeah.
As a queer figure. I just wish we had
just a little bit more.
Just a little bit more. Yeah, it's as I said before, I think.
Because like we can't even confidently put out a hypothesis.
Yeah, and if it was any other accounts of Cassius Dio, I probably would have gone yes, but because there's questions of the motives of Cassius Dio around whether he was just another cis straight man who used queerness as a weapon to discredit those he didn't like. It we never know for sure. But coming out of that, we have another artistic response this week.
Ooh.
This week we have the very talented Jonathan Pastorello, who is a talented pole dancer hailing from the Sunshine Coast. For our audio listeners, I don't think we're going to include the audio.
No.
So you'll have to jump over to the YouTube page to watch it there. And if you're wanting to find him, the details will be in the description of the YouTube as well. He has done a pole dance that honors that concept of gender as well to a degree. I believe. I haven't watched it yet. I like to watch it for the first time here.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think that's where we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it on the artistic response. We will see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
As always, we would like to thank Nyssa Ray for allowing us to use her studio to record this podcast. She's a talented Sunshine Coast-based singer-songwriter. Her details will be in the description. Go check her out. Her work is amazing. We would also like to thank and acknowledge the Sunshine Coast Council and Arts Queensland for their support in this project through the Regional Arts Development Fund. They do great work supporting regional arts workers and artists in Queensland. Funding was provided for this project through the Regional Arts Development Fund. The Regional Arts Development Fund is a partnership between the Queensland Government and the Sunshine Coast Council to support local arts and culture in regional Queensland. We would like to thank them for their support in the delivery of That Old Queer podcast.